Okay, how Sony is becoming the king of animation. Let's watch the video.
So we all know Sony Animation, the studio that brought us some of the best animated films, as well as some of the worst animated movies.
That's so funny. I was about to say, I was just like, I remember Sony was always recognized as one of the worst films, and now it's finally getting a rep for bringing like really good films. I'm like, I wonder why they changed to switch up.
We've ever seen. Following up Smurfs and the
Ew,
Emoji
finally getting
Movie,
a rep
the
for bringing like
Spider-Verse is
really good films. I'm like, I wonder why they changed to switch up.
we've
What?
ever seen.
What? I was just like, what was that? I was just like, what the turd? I was just like, hold up, what? I'm like, not the echo.
Straight up diabolical. So to say they're confusing would be a massive understatement. But why? Why are they so inconsistent? And more importantly, why might that inconsistency actually be the reason they become the best animation studio in the next 5 years? There's a secret no one is talking about. Seriously. Because what I found when I started really looking into how Sony operates kind of blew my mind. See, Sony founded its animation division in 2002, but it wasn't born from a love of animation like Ghibli or Disney. Instead, Sony saw successful movies like
Oh my
Shrek and
goodness.
Monsters Inc.
What?
at the time and realized that they wanted in. The result was a studio with big ambitions but no strong creative DNA. Their first release, open season in 2006, which
Okay, you know what's funny? Wait, 2001, but that was their first one. What? That's a 5 year gap. You know what's funny? Open season, I feel like that's like a fever dream to most people because some people actually enjoyed it. And then they're like, they hate all the spin offs. Like, I remember watching the first one. I was like, okay, it's not bad. But, like, I don't ever go back to watching it compared to, like, people who'd be like, oh, yeah, I like Shrek. I like Madagascar, X, Y, and Z.
actually made a lot of money in theaters, was honestly a very mid animated movie for kids. It wasn't until their second movie that Sony really stepped things up, releasing Surf's Up, a movie that did well at the box office, but that people also
I actually don't really like Cersei. That's so funny. It's just like what? Some of the movies I don't like are the ones that be doing. That's crazy.
but that people just
I
loved
actually don't
because of
really
how
like what?
Surf's Up
Why
was.
is this funny? Forget this. I'm taking off my kick. Like, bruh. Oh my goodness, that's annoying me. Like, stop with the stinking double. Oh, that's irking the bejesus out of me.
Creative and funny it was. I mean, it was an animated mockumentary comedy film. That's unique as hell. And even though it came out after a ton of other penguin movies like Madagascar, Happy Feet, etc., Surf's Up was able to distinguish itself and went on to earn an Oscar nomination. These early films proved Sony had technical skill and talent, they just needed to keep raising the bar. And that's where things got interesting. Because unlike Pixar, which built its identity around emotionally resonant storytelling and innovative 3D animation, or DreamWorks, which leaned into irreverent wit and pop culture, Sony didn't double down on a single style. Actually, the rule at SPA was they wouldn't adhere to any one specific visual style. Each movie would be its own universe. They kept bouncing between genres, tones, and creative leads. And while that made their output feel scattered, it also made everything unique and fun, and was the reason Sony would end up defying all expectations. But we'll touch on that in a bit. In 2009, Sony released Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, directed by
I remember that being successful. That's one I remember being successful to the mass, to the masses, to the mass, to the
none
masses.
other than Phil Lord and Chris Miller. And it was that exact lack of identity and creative vision that allowed them to experiment and flourish creatively. It was a weird, stylized comedy that took an absurd premise, food falling from the sky, and pushed it to visual and narrative extremes. When most animated movies seem to be leaning into realism as much as possible, SPA's creative flexibility allowed Phil and Chris to push the boundaries. The movie was chaotic and bursting with personality, but more than anything, it felt like the product of a very specific creative vision. And that decision turned out to be pivotal. Not only was Cloudy their most successful movie to date, critically and at the box office, it also planted a seed that maybe Sony's identity wasn't about finding a formula, but rejecting one altogether. That maybe instead of one voice, the studio could become a platform for many. This sounded like a great thing in practice, but it meant there would be many, and I mean many flops thereafter. And that process of trying.
Yeah, I think the thing is that the stylization is like people want to be known for one specific style. So like you have DreamWorks and Pixar. Uh, Pixar was known for like that same style. Same with Disney before it became 3D, and now that it's 3D, it's only known for that one style. However, like with Sony, it never had a consistent look. Even when you think of like video games, think of like the Danganronpa games and how it's only one consistent style like that series tends to have. You're like, oh, that's a Danganronpa game. It's like, oh, it's the creators of Danganronpa. And I could see why it'd be like, oh, okay. Meanwhile, if you have someone who decides to have a different look, another example of this would be Hiro Mashima from Fairy Tail. You could tell it's a Hiro Mashima because this man always has the same stinking style throughout. It's like this man does not change up his look no matter what. And some people like it, some people hate it. I'm someone who hates that he never changes his art style, but some people love the fact he doesn't change it. I hate it because it kind of feels like a cop out to me personally because the man doesn't ever what's the right word for it? The man always uses one style, which means every character ends up looking the same. However, some people think that's a genius. Yeah, it's a signature. Some people think it's a signature. Some people think it's a genius move because it's like, hey, that means you'll tell that that's his style. Same like when what's it, Toriyama. You could tell it's a Toriyama style because like what's it called, Dragon Age, Dragon Quest, like the Gohan look you guys would talk about. It's just like, ugh. But I'm tired of seeing someone who looks exactly like Gohan. I'm ready to see someone who doesn't look like Gohan. So like I want a different spin at it.
Trying things, failing, slowly finding your creative voice kind of hit close to home. Because I've been low key doing the same thing while
Yeah.
making these videos. Which is why I actually partnered with
Not
Skillshare to sponsor
Skillshare.
today's video, and where you can learn directly from real
You know what's
success.
funny? I hear Skillshare actually allegedly. Skillshare is known to be a scam. I don't know if it's true or not. I'm just saying that's what I've heard. Don't quote me on that. I'm just saying that's something I've heard. Take it with a grain of salt. That's all I'm saying. I don't know y'all's takes on that, but that's all I'm saying on it.
Creatives from professional illustrators to renowned graphic designers and writers. And the classes include everything from animation and illustration to design, writing, and so much more. The first 500 of you to use my link in the description or scan the QR code will receive 20% off your first year of Skillshare. Get started Transylvania, Sony flops I was mentioning. From Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, Arthur Christmas, and Hotel Transylvania were two bright spots in a sea of mediocrity for the studio. It was hard to pinpoint what to expect from Sony in any given year, and they ended up falling victim to the sequel curse, releasing 10 goddamn sequels in 10 years from 2008 to 2018. Not only that, the Smurfs, the Angry Birds movie 2, and the Emoji movie felt like attempts to chase trends and cash in on IP, which resulted in shit movies and made Sony quickly become the laughingstock of the entire industry. But running parallel to that was something else that nobody could have seen coming. The seeds of one of the greatest animated trilogies of all time were being planted and watered. Because while the Emoji movie was being memed into oblivion, Lord, Miller, and the Sony executives were quietly laying the foundation for something far more ambitious. See, after proving themselves with Cloudy, they had gone on to direct the Lego movie for Warner Brothers. A banger of a movie that reinforced just how bold their style could be and how easily they could handle legacy IP, which is not an easy thing to do. It was funny, it was meta, and it made people take their brand of storytelling seriously. I mean, hell, the Lego movie is an animated classic at this point, and Sony took notice. So when the idea
I mean, I think a lot of people like the first one. I don't know if people like the other ones, but there was people who were like everything is awesome. But there was definitely potential. But it's also they're able to take them investments. I don't know. Some people cannot just be like, let's take investment after investment because they really was going like like when it comes to we watched the video when it came to Scott, right? This man Five Nights at Freddy's was his last chance. Some people do not have chances like Sony does. Like, bro, how many movies they had in order to finally get somewhere? Like, bruh, into the Spider Verse all the way in 2020. That's crazy.
of a Spider-Man animated film was floated, something that had every reason to be a safe, kid-friendly spin-off, Sony wanted people that could push creative boundaries and handle legacy IP with proper care and ambition. So they handed it to Lord and Miller. And instead of treating it like just another superhero cash in, they legitimately went off the rails. In fact, Amy Pascal, who had been overseeing the Spider Man franchise, later said that the smartest thing she did was to keep quiet and stay out of their way. And so Into the Spider Verse became the exact opposite of what people expected from Sony at the time. It was stylish, heartfelt, hilarious, and filled with a level of visual innovation.
Not gonna lie though, this does have so many colors. Like sometimes I'm like, dang, this hurts my eyes. But it's also like stylistic in a way where it's just like, dang, they really went out there and tried something. Because it was very jarring at first to look at, but then it's like, dang, but this story really hit. So it's like people were willing to give it a chance.
That no major Western studio had attempted at that scale since Pixar in the 90s. Suddenly, Sony was leading the charge in an entirely new direction of animation, where Pixar and Disney
Like,
had
dang.
long prized.
Like, just look at that, like, single clip. It's like, dang, that really does. Yeah, it's like the comic book motion. It's like the feel. It's like, I don't even like comic books, but it's like, you could tell it was, like, inspired from a comic book. It's like, ooh, this is really cool. And it's like, um, you could feel that inspiration coming through. And that's, like, one of the reasons why people could, like, feel, like, the passion towards it. It's like that passion that people say instead of like another cash grab. It feels passionate, and that's what I feel like with the other movies. They always keep like when it comes to like the Disney movies, right? Everyone's like they're well, people say the only people who like these movies are Disney adults because all the movies don't feel passionate or creative because they feel like a cash grab. Like why am I gonna watch Stitch and what's it called? Why am I gonna watch Snow White Stitch when I already have the animated version? Like, why do I want to see the live action version so badly? And especially when these live action movies are coming back to back instead of like giving us actual 3D movies. And when the 3D movies do come out, they feel like wasted potential because it's just like every character tends to be the same or whatnot. It's just like, why do I want to watch this? Like, and the thing is, they had momentum at one point. Like they had Zootopia, even though they had some flaws with it. They had Zootopia, they had Coco, they had stuff that they were working with, and then they decided, never mind. Because remember when Frozen came out, everyone was like, oh my goodness. And so they kept slowly trying to fix the formula because they're like, they had to figure out how to do a twist villain. They didn't know how to do a twist villain. And so they didn't know how to do a twist villain, so they tried to get into Zootopia. They still couldn't get it down, but they mastered it finally in Coco, which was why Coco works. So it's like it took them a while to get it right, which is what Sony. It took them a while for Sony to get it right, and now that they finally understood it, they're keep riding off of it. However, Disney has regrets. It's just like, okay, what are they doing with like Mulan, Snow White, and Stitch? What can they do with something that was already good? They can't really do reinvent the wheel that was already good to begin with unless they change it, and people don't like the changes that they do. So it's just like, what's the point of the movie? So that's the problem with those movies. It's that you can't really do anything unless you plan on telling a different story. But people want a different story, not just the story retold when it comes to Stitch. Then it's like you don't tell the story of Lilo and Stitch and have a different ending. if you if you were going to tell the same story just to change the ending, right? It's just like, why would you want that? No one wants that. They wanted Lilo and Stitch like it was originally. So that's the problem with like Disney right now.
Clean, hyper realistic CG, Spider Verse went the opposite way. Clashing frame rates, comic book halftones, graffiti textures, hand drawn flourishes, color coded universes. It was a movie that looked like a living comic book, and we all absolutely adored it. It's still one of my top 5 favorite animated movies of all time. Critics raved, and animators around the world got inspired. It
Mm.
completely redefined what a big budget animated film could look like, while even going on to win Best Animated Feature at the Oscars. And in doing so, it proved something critical about Sony. Their chaos and lack of uniform style was actually their recipe to success, or so they thought. But as we'll talk about later, things would start to get complicated behind the scenes. They had no house style, no overarching brand identity, no rigid playbook, and that very lack of structure became the thing that allowed the Spider Verse to exist in the first place. If Sony had been more conservative, more uniform, or more brand conscious, that movie never would have made it past the pitch phase. Or at least it wouldn't have taken nearly as many risks as it did. So, yes, Sony spent a decade shooting.
Yeah, like you know what's funny? I was rewatching the second one with my mom, right? Into the Spider-Verse, right? It was funny because they made a Logan Paul apology video in the middle of the Spider-Verse. It's just like Mom Ross. It's like, I have made a continuous. I was like, what? I was like, this is such a old me. I'm like, bro. I was just like, bro's gonna pop out a ukulele at any second. He's like, and then he did the same joke. I was like, bro, this is insane. The fact that he really did that. It was just um, like you don't catch that at first too. So it was just like, wait a second. So Jack Frost animated US is my top 10 in it. That's a DreamWorks, right? Jack Frost. So, oh, Jack Frost animated? Oh wait, no. I'm here thinking like the one with the scary looking one. So, underrated movie. I don't know. I'm here the one where they talk about Jack Frost and Elsa shipping that one.
Blanks for the most part, but all the while they were also building a culture that, when paired with the right creatives, could result in something magical. And after Into the Spider Verse, everyone else started paying attention. Studios scrambled to capture that same unpredictable visual magic. Semi stylization was all the
Nightmare Before Has
craze.
Jack. No,
DreamWorks
not
leaned
that
into
one.
expressive, beautiful, stylized animation with The Bad Guys, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and The Wild
Puss in
Robot.
Boots was pretty
Netflix
good.
pushed out Nimona, Intergalactic. Even Disney tried to do their own stylized animation with Wish, although we all know how that turned out. And while the
See,
rest of the industry was still trying to catch up, Sony had already moved on, backing The Mitchells versus the Machines, a movie that blended heartwarming family drama with chaotic internet energy, all with another awesomely stylized animation style, becoming one of the most refreshingly original animated films in years, and earning them another Oscar nomination. It even made me cry when I watched it back in 2023, and I gave it a 4.5 stars both of the times that I watched it.
bro.
Sony had found their style and creative direction. And if Into the Spider Verse proved that taking risks could pay off, Across the Spider Verse proved that doubling down on creative freedom, even at the cost of complete mayhem behind the scenes, could lead to greatness. Which it did. I mean, Across the Spider Verse became the highest grossing Sony animated movie ever, and earned them their third Oscar nomination in 5 years, which is insane.
Mm-hmm.
Sony had made it. A studio that was finally respected and considered
The
among the
fact that
upper
everyone's so
echelon
big
of
and Sony
animation.
is so
But
small.
yet, behind the scenes, something dark had been brewing for years. While Sony's outside facade was one of success, innovation, and creative risk, there were major cracks that the studio was covering up. cracks that could threaten to undermine everything Sony had built. Because while the stylistic inconsistency and creative chaos can clearly be a recipe for greatness, it can also lead to absolute disaster. And nowhere is that clearer than behind the scenes of the Spider.
Okay, for before we finish this up, I can't wait. Yeah, I can't wait either. The reason why that could be deadly in itself is because, bro, um, so you guys know I talk about my game all the time, artist choice, right? Um, Brianna style, by the way. I originally intended to be a more of like clashing design, where it was supposed to have manga aesthetic, anime aesthetic, comic book aesthetic. It was supposed to be all over the place, right? And when it came to that style, I was told that's not a good idea when it comes to visual novels, because I'm like, I was treating it like a comic book or webtoon. You know how they have so many different styles, and they're like, that's not a good idea for visual novels, right? It's a clash in aesthetics, right? Because people cannot be consistent, and it was tough because so when it comes to stuff like Into the Spider Verse, you know how this has a comic style and whatnot. Having people replicate it could be difficult. Um, the same could happen when it comes to indie projects. If you are working with a big or small team, depending on what style it is hard to replicate a certain style, depending on the person's experience or what they have a preference for, right? And so it's very difficult to want to put what you want to do actually on paper, um, because of the difficulties and challenges that will occur, could occur, and probably will occur. So that's why it's like, oof. I could already feel like there could be a lot that happens behind the scenes. Because it is tough. Like even like the smallest of games, it's tough being consistent or having some type of like design for it to be like, oh yes, let's just do this and that and this and that. It's so difficult to want to do everything and actually execute it properly. Because if you don't execute it properly, people are gonna be like, why is this inconsistent? Instead of, oh, this is such a stylistic choice. One example I could think of is, you know how JoJo's Bizarre Adventure has all these color coded stuff that be happening, wackiness and all that. um that's seen as cool, quirky, and whatnot. But like, if someone's playing a visual novel and then one moment your character has blue hair, the next moment they have green hair, they're like, wait, is this the same character? It's gonna be so jarring to look at, and it's just like, oh, okay. So then you kind of understand, like, yeah, you can't be doing all that you want to do.
Movies. While we were all blown away by the visuals and storytelling, the reality for the animation teams was a different story entirely. As I talked about in my previous Spider-Verse video, the production process was insanely grueling. Artists were often left in the dark about what sequences were final, entire scenes were reanimated from scratch, sometimes multiple times, and the direction? Frequently unclear, often contradictory, and constantly shifting. This was the byproduct of a studio culture that thrives on spontaneity and last minute creative pivots, with two people like Chris and Phil that relish in that sort of atmosphere. Phil's grip on the film was especially tight, with Amy and other producers having a more hands off approach, and Phil's notes and comments taking precedence over anything the directors said. Compare this to how studios like Pixar and Disney operate. These movies have super large budgets, yes, but the bulk of that money and time goes into development, years of storyboarding. By the time they enter full production, the vision is usually locked. They don't waste animation on scrapped ideas because the ideas were solidified long before rendering even began. Sony, on the other hand, dove into production with many of its key ideas still evolving. This meant animators were constantly playing catch up. One day a scene was approved, the next it was being thrown out or completely reworked. And when you're working in a medium where every second of footage requires hundreds of hours of labor, that's just a ridiculous way of working. Many of the artists who worked on Across the Spider-Verse have spoken out about the toll it took long hours, intense pressure, and an endless churn of revisions. The irony is, though, that this chaos produced
Yeah, that's yeah. Yeah. Artists do not like to do more work than they have. And artists want their work to be shown. So, it's like to hear that like, oh wait, this is not gonna be used. What was the point of doing it? It wouldn't even matter if they're getting paid or not because it's just like, what was the point of me working on this then? It's just like, what's the point? It's literally, what's the point of doing this? That would be so frustrating. I can understand. It's just like, what's the point? How for yeah, it's but and it yeah, it never got used. That's one of the things. So it's just like all these ideas. It's like you want them there, and it's to have. There's also the idea of wanting to have backups, but there's also it's just like people want to know that it's going to be used and not just a backup. And that's one of the sad realities when it comes to making like not even just games and movies, but just anything in general when it comes to doing this type of things. It's very frustrating.
one of the most celebrated animated films of the decade. Can a studio sustain this level of experimentation without sacrificing the well being of its artists? That's the paradox of Sony animation. Their inconsistency allows for radical brilliance, but left unchecked, it can just as easily lead to burnout. And yet, despite all of that, I still believe Sony is about to become the best animation studio in the next 5 years, and I'm gonna tell you why right now. Because for all its flaws, that very chaos is exactly what sets them apart. It's what allows them to take risks other studios won't, and as unpredictable as their track record may be, their upcoming slate might just be the clearest sign yet that Sony Animation
Drink
is
Demon
evolving,
K
not into the most
get
consistent
K-pop
studio,
hunter.
but maybe the most daring, and potentially the most important. What's coming next isn't just more of the same. It's weirder, riskier, more original. They're releasing K-pop Demon Hunters as
Yeah.
we speak.
So I just saw this. And yeah, now that they said that this was Sony, it makes a whole bunch more sense with how it was animated. Bro, the amount of if you look at it, how expressive these characters were, it made sense. Even though the style itself, I was just it was kind of jarring, but like when you see how expressive the characters are, it's like, oh wow, what a very expressive, and like people love this movie. Not even just for the songs, but like how how expressive the show movie is. Like I saw it. The story itself, I already had reviewed this. The story itself is okay. Some people are mixed about it because like the whole romance part of it is iffy. But like, yeah, I think the story part of the music was really good, and the animation itself was super well done as well.
Genre mashup about a girl K-pop group that moonlights as demon slayers, and although the premise is weird, the trailer looks genuinely good, and people are already praising it early on. They've got Fixed coming up, an R-rated animated
R
comedy about a
rated.
dog trying to escape his neutering appointment by the creator and director of Samurai Jack, by the way. And this is the first R-rated animated movie by a major Western studio. They've got Black Knight, an animated fantasy epic from the same guy, a Mitchells vs. the Machines sequel, which is one of the few sequels I'm genuinely excited for. They've got an animated sports comedy movie about a
Goat.
goat that
Just
ends
called
up
Goat.
going pro in his favorite sport. And of course, Spider Man Beyond the Spider Verse, the final chapter that could cement this is the best animated trilogy of all.
I don't know, man, but um, the Miles. What I don't know, but like you could tell that there's so much needing to be done. Like I remember having a conversation with my friend. He's like, I don't understand why they don't do certain features with characters. I was just like, because so many features on a character would be so complicated to put like it whether it's a western or indie, right? Like not western, indie or high development, right? But especially indie, it's like having so many features on a character would be like so much work to do later down the line. It's just like, oh my goodness, like imagine having to animate every single strand and whatnot. Like, oof, I could not.
all time. But what's most exciting about all these projects is that they're mostly original stories. I mean, they have 7 original projects coming out from this point forward, and on top of that, in 2020, they stated they wanted to focus more on R rated animated movies, which is a completely different approach to the
I
other major
think K-pop
studios
was
and
just
is
PG.
so incredibly exciting. Honestly, what they're doing is so rare in today's animation landscape. Disney is leading harder than ever into sequels and remakes, and even their original stuff seems incredibly bland and safe. Pixar is kind of doing the same, with 3 out of their 5 upcoming movies being
Incredible
sequels.
threes,
Meanwhile,
that's
Sony is
crazy.
completely setting themselves apart. And somehow, even with all the chaos, or maybe because of it, they're creating space for the next wave of animation innovation. So, yes, Sony might still be inconsistent, they might still frustrate their artists, but if they can refine their process, improve their working conditions without neutering their creative process, and continue backing unique creative risks, I genuinely believe that they could become the studio that
Yeah,
defines the next
Incredible 2
5
was
to 10 years of
mid.
animation.
But yeah, like understanding animation or like storytelling is important. Um when I was writing for my story, I was realizing how little I understand when it comes to certain things, which we'll talk about in a second. Let me just do this real quick. But also, what do you guys think with this video? What are your thoughts? Comment down below. Thank you.